is its empiricism, but one can utilize the empirical approach for this sort of data it was designed to address without thereby excluding every other epistemological approach, such as abstract mathematics or even questions about epistemology itself. So we were kind of talking about beforehand is if you show the logical positive himself in the mirror, well, he fails to be able to see himself using his own standards. So we can do the classic postmodernist approach of there are no absolutes. Are you absolutely sure? Therefore, you rub yourself out. So you yourself can't hold yourself to your own standards. So
that's the empirical verification principle isn't empirically verified, right? So that caused them to crash and burn. Right?
Yeah, it just took a little bit because of how much influence they had. Well, traditional scientific empiricism involves knowledge that can be replicated experimentally there. But if all knowledge were limited to this approach, there would be little place for historians, journalists, and members of other professions working with different forms of human knowledge. Now, maybe we can do without the journalists, but let's at least let the historians have a place at the table. So
and so this is an important point, right? When you have this kind of what often is called scientism, or science, scientific statements are the only truth statements, right? Then that wipes out a huge amount of source of knowledge that we have, right? History, all historical statements are wiped out, and other professions that deal with it, mathematics, quite frankly, can be wiped out using this kind of stuff. Yeah. So it gets us into all kinds of problems when we narrow our focus and say only scientific empiricism gives us knowledge. Well, what about all the rest of the things that we have, that we're full of, that allows for knowledge? Real narrow focus, and it puts us in a box, and quite frankly, put them in a box, the logical positivists, and that's why it kind of crashed and burned.
Right. So you can have the big questions like, all right, maybe this approach can help us determine when life begins, but it can't help us to determine whether or not we can execute life before birth. So with the abortion, or how about just even simple things? You're walking along, you have $5 in your pocket, and you really want that coffee. Should you spend that $5 now, or wait to put that money towards the purchase of a house? So, how do we titrate this? How do we do a scratch test? What atoms do I have to put together in order to determine which one I do here? So
science can tell us how to make a bomb, but they can't tell us whether or not we should use it, right?
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. Yeah.
So then he goes on to conclude here that one cannot justify an exclusively experimentalist epistemology by experimental means. So, it faces itself in front of the mirror, and like a vampire, it can't see its own reflection, and therefore it should scare itself away there.
Right. And so he says, partly for these reasons, many philosophers today readily distance themselves from positivism and positivist epistemology. The movement's wane in professional philosophy did not, however, he tells us, immediately offset its effects in 20th century historiography, nor did it neutralize all of this approach's common legacy of prejudice against religion. Right. So even though the movement waned and fell out of favor, the residue of it influenced history and religion. And that's what he's getting at here. All right.